What's going on, friends? This is Neil Adler with Syracuse Central on the Fan Arch Network. Happy Monday morning. Is it a happy Monday morning for you? Well, I don't know. So, Syracuse football against number 24 Tennessee. Didn't work out the way we expected. I think there's some positives to take away from that game. There's definitely things that Syracuse needs to continue working on. Let me just say this. Number one, credit to Tennessee. They played well. Especially on offense. That offense, which came into this game with some areas to monitor, kind of like Syracuse's offense, given that both had new quarterbacks and Tennessee had lost multiple of its top wide receivers from a year ago, and their running back, who was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year. So there was a revamped offensive line, just like Syracuse's. So we knew, or we thought coming into this game, that Tennessee's defense would be stout, although they gave up 26 points. But we had more questions on offense for Tennessee as well as Syracuse's, although Syracuse's defense was not very good by and large. But Tennessee's offense hummed along. Their offensive line just they protected Joey Aguilar well. He made good decisions. Didn't have any interceptions. Threw for like 200 and almost 50 yards, three touchdowns, no picks. Their offense was balanced. Nearly 250 yards both on the ground and through the air, and their offensive line, like I said, was they didn't give up any sacks. Syracuse's defensive front could not get a lot of pressure on Aguilar and did not do well stopping the run game either. So I guess my point here is that Tennessee came in number 24 in the country, but they're going to move up in the rankings obviously later today in both the AP and coaches polls. And, I don't know if they're going to be one of the top two or three or four teams in the SEC. The SEC is loaded like it is every year, but Tennessee's a good team. So this was a tough first test for Syracuse. They didn't embarrass themselves on national TV. They had a chance to cut it to a one-score game in the fourth quarter, and they didn't do that, and then Tennessee scored to make it a 19-point margin. But they hung around. They fought tough. Tennessee right now, look, this is the bottom line. And let me know what you think. Please drop me some comments. Let me know what you thought about the game, the Syracuse offense, the defense, just everything, whatever. Tennessee is just a better team right now. They're in the SEC. I assume they have more NIL money and rev share money, so they have a bigger budget. Syracuse can still, as Bob Wischusen and Louis Riddick said toward the end of the game, Syracuse can still have a good season. We knew this was going to be a tough first game. They've got a lot of other tough games coming up, road ACC games. They go to Notre Dame towards the end of the year. So I'm not necessarily anticipating that Syracuse is going to go 9-3 in the regular season and then win a bowl game. They could win a bowl game, but you know what I'm saying, to finish 10-3. But that doesn't mean they're going to have a bad year. The offense, and I'll get more into this in these next few segments, the offense has to replace Kyle McCord. Steve Angeli is not Kyle McCord, at least not yet. And but the defense, is kind of same story as last year in terms of missed tackles and other things, and I'll get more into that in a few minutes. But by and large, I wasn't surprised by the outcome. Syracuse again put up fight, and when they had a chance, there was multiple times when they fell behind pretty large and then would answer, but then Tennessee would answer right back. They just couldn't put it all together in a complete effort on both sides of the field. Tennessee's just better. They're just bigger, stronger. They're more talented. That doesn't mean Syracuse is a stinky program or the season's over or whatever. Like I said, it was 38-26 in the fourth quarter, and Syracuse, if they could have scored, could have made it a one-possession game. And I still don't, or one-score game in terms of, touchdown. I still don't think necessarily that Syracuse would win the game because their defense couldn't stop Tennessee. But, if that happened, maybe we're looking at a game where, sure, they still lose, and no moral victories here, but they lose by, 5 points or whatever it's going to be. Instead, they lose by 19. So, all in all, it is what it is. Let's get ready for UConn. We knew it was going to be a tough game. Syracuse, in terms of their resume, Not that they're necessarily going to compete for the CFP, but their resume isn't going to be dinged by losing to an underranked Tennessee team at a neutral site that had obviously a pro Volunteers crowd, given the proximity between Knoxville and Atlanta versus Central New York. But Syracuse hung around. They fought tough. Things to work on. It is what it is. It's week one. They lost to a quality team. We'll move on here. So let's talk about the offense. And again, drop me comments. Let me know. So the only thing I'll say here is, and as some of you know, I write about Syracuse for some other sites as well, as well as having the show here now. The one thing that drives me nuts about fans, and I'm a fan too, but it's like, I'm tweeting yesterday or whatever from one of the other places I work, and people are like, Steve Angeli's garbage or this and that. And it's like, dude, he had one game. And why do we call him garbage? Just say he wasn't that good. Why do we call a person garbage? I don't know. Maybe it's wishful thinking on my part. But so anyway, we'll start with Steve Angeli. He's making his second career start. He started, I believe, Notre Dame's bowl game a couple years back. He was okay. He wasn't amazing by any means. He had the fumble, so he's got to be stronger with the ball, because that ended up being a scoop and score. And that's what I was talking about with like momentum killers. Again, multiple times where Syracuse like scored to kind of get back in it a little bit and then gave up a score right away. Well, this Angeli in the first half, Syracuse had just recovered a fumble. And then Angeli, I think it was the next play or one of the next two play, the next series, he fumbles it right back. And then it's a scoop and score. So that's just a dagger. So he had the fumble, he had the pick, it was a deflected pass. He had one touchdown pass to Jonte Cook, who looks really good. He was okay. He's not Colin McCord. People are saying, "Oh, put Ricky Collins in." So Angeli, I think, was 23 or 40 for like almost 275 yards with a touchdown and a pick and one fumble. I mean, obviously his pro football focus PFS grades were not great, but he wasn't awful. And Fran Brown has said afterwards that he still has complete confidence in Angeli. It was his first game in a Syracuse uniform, second career start, playing a really good defense. He was okay. I think Yassine Willis is going to be a beast. He had 23 carries for 91 yards, 3 scores on the ground. That's not an amazing per yard yards per carry, but that dude can just bowl over people, and I think he's going to be really good. Wide receivers, Angeli spread it around. Multiple guys had a couple catches, led by Jonte Cook. Justin Ross Simmons had a couple nice grabs. Daryl Gill, who is their leading production-wise receiver from last year, I don't think he had his first catch until I think it was the third quarter. So try and get him a little more involved earlier on. But I think the receiver room will be fine. The offensive line is retooled from last year. I think the offensive line had some good moments and obviously some not so good moments, because Angeli was sacked 5 times. So that's a problem. And again, Willis had 91 yards, but on 23 carries, you want to have a little bit higher average than that, but not awful. So, but then there were times when the offensive line allowed Angeli to have a clean pocket and have some time, and he threw it 40 times. So I don't think the offensive line, the problem is Tennessee has a really good defense. And I mentioned on the show last week, they have high quality edge rushers, and they're bigger and stronger. And so they, presented problems for Syracuse. It is what it is. They're just a better team. But, overall, Syracuse scored 26 points on a Volunteers team that will probably have a top 10 defense in the country. And again, Syracuse lost the turnover battle 2-1. They needed to win that. And Tennessee scored 14 points, I believe, off Syracuse's 2 miscues. So the offense wasn't awful. It wasn't amazing, but it wasn't awful by any stretch. So, like I said, let's see what they do. It's a small sample size. It's one freaking game. Let's see how Syracuse does against a UConn team that comes in this Saturday to the Dome. I think it's another noon start. UConn won 9 games last year, and Syracuse only, I think, beat them. It was a fairly close game. Honestly, I don't remember what the final score was. I don't know if they won by 14 or maybe it was only 7. But so that's not a cakewalk. But let's see how they bounce back. So the offense, it was okay. It was okay. 26 points against a pretty good, a really good defense, of the opponent. Okay. So the defense gotta hit tackles in the open field. Got to make those tackles. But it's interesting. Syracuse.com had a good story about this. I hadn't had a chance to look through and kind of do a huge deep dive, so I relied on their article just to prepare for the show today. Um, but multiple guys on Syracuse's defense had solid grades, but then there were other guys that struggled. And I'm curious. Drop me a line. Drop me something in the comments about the Syracuse came out with their depth chart like right before the game or a couple hours before. And there weren't a ton of surprises, but Antoine Delaurier was a starting linebacker, and Derek McDonald, a redshirt senior, was not. Did that surprise you? Kind of surprised me. Um, but the defense, it's Tennessee just overwhelmed the Syracuse defensive front and had their way with it. On the ground, multiple. Tennessee doesn't have one stud; they have multiple guys, more of a platoon approach. But they had multiple guys rush for a sizable amount of yards, and they almost had 250 total yards. And their per carry average on the ground was very impressive. And the offensive line just wore out Syracuse's defensive front. And I think an issue for Syracuse, just generally speaking, are they going to be able to pressure the opposing team's quarterback? Because Joey Aguilar, who threw 14 picks last year, he didn't seem to get pressured a ton. I don't remember how many, if there were any, or how many quarterback hurries there were. I believe he wasn't sacked, but Syracuse is going to, their edge rushers, in their front and their linebackers, whoever, they're Delaurier and Gary Bryant, and others, Sparrow, McDonald, or guys on the edge. They're gonna have to get more pressure, up front and around the edge and on the quarterback, because there was multiple times, and the one time that sticks out the most to me is at the end of the game, towards the end of the game, when again, Syracuse had a chance to cut it to one score that didn't happen, and then Tennessee scored, and that kind of put it away. But then on their last year, I mean, they just ran the ball down their throat and just took all the time off the clock, and it was like easy peasy, and that's just a problem. And I think Syracuse is, they have, as I've talked about on Syracuse Central, they have veteran guys on the defensive line, but some guys are new to the program, transfers, or guys just being thrust into larger roles. And there's certain position groups where I think Syracuse has strong depth, but the on the edge, defensive ends, etc., I don't know, do they have a lot of depth? I don't think they do. So that's a concern. And so you look at the defensive line, the edge guys, the linebackers, the hybrid linebackers, such edge guys, the jack, isn't that what they call it? So that's concerning. The open the open field, the missed tackles, Fran Brown talked about it. From a secondary perspective, multiple guys again had pretty good grades. Obviously, Dimitri Samuel Jr. was not one of them. So he's barely 17 years old. He's the second youngest player in all of FBS. He had a pass breakup. He had a PI call against him, and then he gave up, I think it was a 73-yard touchdown pass. They had clearly picked on him, and why wouldn't they? He's a true freshman. He's got crazy talent. And Fran Brown said, I don't know if it was at halftime or what, he said, just keep at it. I love you. Just keep at it. Yeah, of course. It's the first game. They're playing Tennessee, a Southeastern Conference big-time school that made the CFP last year. And, I again, they look more like a top, and again, these preseason rankings are early, I mean, they're so tough, but they look like a top, if not a top 10, top 15 team to me. Yeah. So, Samuel had a rough day. I thought Deuce Chestnut, by and large, was pretty solid. So, we'll see. The defense as a whole, again, some guys were pretty good. Some guys were really poor. Overall, obviously, duh, I'm saying the captain obvious here. You can't give up 45 points and expect to win. And, a lot of other fans were saying to me, on some of my social media channels for other, places that I cover Syracuse, saying things like, well, it's like the same old defense from last year. Guys miss tackles. They give up way too many points. The offense is going to have to outscore opponents, and they don't have Kyle McCord, so that's a problem. And, that's like a fair thing to say. That's fair. Steve Angeli, after one game, no disrespect, is not Kyle McCord. But he could continue to get better and better and better. Kyle McCord came to Syracuse. It was obviously his senior year was his lone year in the program, so week one was his first ever start for Syracuse, but he had been a full-time starter at a Big Ten school the year before. That's a lot different than Steve Angeli, who came from Notre Dame and, got some mop-up duty and played in the CFP semifinal against Penn State. I'll give you that, but not the same reps. And he came to Syracuse in the spring versus the winter window, transfer portal window. So it's different. So let's see how he fares. Um, but again, by and large, I don't think Syracuse is going to put up as many points as last year. So their defense is going to have to be better. I mean, that's all. There's nothing else to say. That doesn't mean the season's over and Syracuse is going to stink. I don't think they're going to go 9-3 in the regular season like they did last year. But I think if they, kind of get their stuff together, they could be 7-5 or whatever, 8-4. But we'll see. But the defense, yeah, again, it has to improve, and it is what it is. So we'll move on to this last story, and I'm going to be brief with this. So this stuff in college football, and it happens in other sports too. I see it in soccer all the time. Like the fake injuries or guys going down to like halt the momentum of the other team. If it's a guy on defense like is injured, and then there's an injury timeout, and the opposing team's on offense, and they have all this momentum. Dimitri Samuel Jr. got called out for it by the announcing team, and he should have. And I think on that one play where he went down, I don't know if Deuce Chestnut went down or was looking like he was going to go down, but Samuel went down first. But Tennessee did it too, so I'm not calling out Samuel here. I'll just leave it at this, my friends. That kind of stuff is really annoying. And I guess if you do it and you get away with it, and there's an injury timeout and the other team's on offense, and they are driving, and it kind of stalls their momentum for a second, and then that helps result in the other team not scoring, I guess good for you. But no, I don't want to win that way. I don't want Syracuse to do that crap. So be curious to see what Fran Brown thinks about that. But I'm not a fan of that stuff. Just be better on defense. Be better. Stop them. Or don't stop them, and then they're just a better team, and you're going to lose. Okay, fine. But, like, that stuff is Bush League. And, yeah, and I think Dimitri Samuels is going to be a really good player. And he's super young. But like I said, even it looked like Deuce was doing it, and he's a senior, a redshirt senior. I mean, he's a veteran. So don't do that crap. Come on. We're better than that. All teams are better. Do better, all right? Thank you. I'm going to leave it at that, okay? Let me know what you thought, though, because the announcing team did call out Dimitri. It was kind of funny. In any event, let me know what you think of week one. Let me know what you think about Syracuse on offense, defense, and how you think the team is kind of going to look moving forward. Again, it's 1 week. The season isn't over. I was a really good opponent at a neutral site with a new quarterback, a new running back, a new offensive line, lots of new players on both sides of the field. There was a lot. So, and other teams have to deal with it too. But it was a test for Syracuse. They hung around. They had a chance to cut it to one score. They didn't, so they lost by 19. They didn't cover, so I was wrong there. But they fought, and I'll give them that. So, love my alma mater. Was disappointed in the outcome. It is what it is. When I see my son this weekend, he loves the Volunteers. He's going to talk mad smack. To me. So that'll be enjoyable. I'm really looking forward to that. But I'm happy for the Vols. Kudos to them. I hope they keep winning. It makes our loss look better. But Syracuse has UConn on Saturday at the Dome. And we'll have more Syracuse football, some basketball, and recruiting stuff in both sports coming up. So let me know what you like about the show and what you don't. Really enjoy you. Really appreciate you tuning in and really enjoying being the host of Syracuse Central. This is Neil Adler. for Syracuse Central via the Fan Arch Network, and I will talk to you again on Tuesday, my friends. Take care. Thanks again.